All right, I'm going to start this lesson right off where we left off from the last lesson because I can show you a few things here. But this lesson is going to be a bit of the what I call the bear lesson. This is kind of showing you the interface of Maya, which is, like I said, kind of a bit of a bear. But we're going to make it very simple. I'm going to focus on the things you really need. There's just layers and layers of menus that um, yeah, there's menus upon menus. There's all kinds of things here. But I'm going to focus on the basics just to get you up and running. And, as you go, we'll be using these more and more. At first, the first part of using Maya, you don't need too much of this stuff, just some of it. But as you continue using it, as your skills get more complex, then you're going to find you're going to be needing some of these things, or you're going to need finer and finer control on things. And once you get used to things too, you're going to find it's great because you have all these levels and ways to access things, to control things, to change names, and code in numbers, all kinds of things. So, but let me give you the basics. So here are all the objects we had from before. I'm going to tumble around a little bit. So that's Alt or Option key, left mouse button, tumble around. We manipulated these a few of these objects before, scaled them up, etc. So basically here they are. And in our toolbar, I already showed you a few spots in the interface, so I'll go over them again. So the first one I showed you was the shelf. So the shelf is just basically a graphical interface. So it basically gives you tools with an icon. So you can just, if you like icons, these are great. Eventually later on in my, you'll probably start using keys and marking menus and all kinds of other things just for speed. But when you first start, this is great because in the old days they didn't have these and you had to poke around all over the place for things. Now you can just go right up to these little shelves here. Okay. So that was the first thing I showed you, shelves and primitive objects here. So, and then I showed you the toolbox, which is the second most handy thing. This helps you transform and manipulate objects at the most basic level. You got your picking, you have your moving, you have your rotating, and you have your scaling, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select my pick tool, and I'm gonna pick one of these objects. So I'm gonna pick that cube there. So I don't know if anybody noticed, but if you look over here on the left of your screen, there's this little menu item here. This is what we call our outliner. So if you notice, there's our object. It's sitting right there. So when you select it, if I deselect it, when I'm picking space, it's now deselected, okay? Same thing, I can do that. I can pick the sphere, it selects there. I can not pick over here. I can go over here and pick the cylinder from here. Sometimes your scenes are going to be so complex, you're going to have so many parts that you're not even going to be able to find your piece. So you're going to have to come up here into the outliner and you have to pick on the object, okay? And within here too, you can name these. You can double click on these and their names become active, so you can actually change their names. There's a few different spots you can change names on things, but that's just a quick tour of what that is over there. Okay, now probably the main thing, which would be the most common thing you'd see in any program with any Windows format, is your regular pull down menus. So this is where all your main stuff is, and all of these little graphical elements all exist up here. And as I mentioned, when Maya started 20, 30 years ago, you got most of these things from up here. Okay, so these are your your pull down menu bars. So there's a few key ones you're going to want to know. I mean, for certain, you're going to want to have all your file. There's all your file input and output. So if you want to, change your scene, you have to go here to new scene. If you want to open a scene, you have to open it. If you want to save it, if you want to save it as a different name, if you want to import a different type of file, you have to bring it over here. And then there's just a whole bunch of other stuff. And like, as I said, Maya's interface is a bear. Don't get intimidated. In this course, we're going to show you just the basics so you can make models. So you don't have to worry about, knowing every little tiny thing in here. And learning Maya can take a long time. I mean, it can take up to 2-3 years to really master it. Okay. You have your edit menu over here. not going to do too much with that at this very moment. Your create menu, I showed you before when we were creating our primitives. These are what they call polygon primitives. So those correspond to the objects that are in the shelf there: sphere, cube, cylinder, cone, torus, plane, disk. Some of these other objects, we'll play around with them later. They're kind of fun little things to do, but not primary. And then there's different types. We'll go over this later on the semester. There's other modules. There's different types of 3D models, different model forms, object forms. Okay, and you can get to things like lights and cameras and things like that. So this is where you would create things. This is where you have different kinds of selection control. Right now, we'll be focused mostly on just selecting with the pointer tool, but later on, you might want to start selecting by some more sophisticated type things. Modify. We'll be doing some work with modifying. Display. This controls your windows here. Windows, we have a lot of different kinds of windows, which we'll get into. They pop up later. And then a lot of these: mesh edit, mesh tools, mesh display, curve, surfaces, deform, UV, generate. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. Arnold for rendering, all kinds of things in here. Okay, so those are your pull down menus. Okay, so now you have your main window here. And remember too, also, if you hit your space bar, that will give you the 4 window. So you have your perspective window, you have your side window, you have your front window, and you have your top window. And then if you go back to whatever window you want, I'm going to go back to perspective window. I'm going to hit the space bar, and then I have that back. Okay. So that's the key thing. You have your window here. You have your pull down menus. So if you ever open up Maya and you didn't have anything, you just go up to the top and you'll find everything here. Okay, because sometimes you can change the interface a lot. You might, in the future when you're working somewhere, you may go someplace and they might have their interfaces set up a little differently. So, but you will always find things up here. Okay, so you have that. Then we have our toolbox for transforming. I showed you a little bit about the outliner, just a very brief kind of overview of the outliner. Okay, so you have these. On top here, you have your panel toolbar. This has a lot of controls which control display within the window. There's a variety of things here, and we're not, again, there's like tons of things in here, so we're not going to get into all of them right away. And I showed you a few of them already, like some of the key ones you'll be needing right now. If you want to switch your grid off, if you want to change your shading mode, which is wireframe, shaded mode, wireframe on shaded mode. Those will be pretty much the ones we're going to be using right now. And don't mess around with these too much right now, because you don't know what these are, and you might get confused later, like, what did I do? So try and stick with just these 4 I showed you: grid, wireframe, shaded, and wireframe on shaded. Okay. And I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna just keep it stepping through very basically. Okay. Let me switch that wireframe off. All right. So that's our panel toolbar. This is our shelf. These are our pull down menus. We have the status line, which is these. These have even more controls of things. We have different shelves in here as well. So just so you can see these. These have different kinds of the curves, which are a different kind of way of making models. The first part of class, we're going to be focusing on polygons, which are pretty straightforward and pretty simple. Sculpting, which we'll get into a little bit, sculpting models. Rigging, we're not going to get into this course. That rigging has got to do with animation. Rigging is when you take characters and you put skins on them, things like that. Animation, we'll do just the most basic level animation. Rendering, we will be doing. We won't be doing anything with effects and all the rest of this stuff. This gets, this is stuff we're not going to be dealing with at all in the class, except this one, Arnold. Arnold relates to rendering. Okay, Arnold is the render that's been added to Maya a few years back, which was an independent company that was purchased by Autodesk, and it's a really excellent photorealistic renderer. But again, we're not going to get into that till later on in the semester. All right, so those are your different shelves here. So, and like I said, we're going to focus on the polygon modeling for now. And if you ever come into Maya and you see something different, just, poke onto one of these, and I find students tend to use the shelves a lot, especially when they start. Okay. All right. So another thing as well is we have our quick layout buttons. These we'll get into a little bit more later. What happens in Maya is eventually you start having using different interfaces for different kinds of operations. And you can access these here, the most basic. So if I want just a single window, if I want the quad window, if you don't want to do the space bar thing, this is where you access it right here. Okay. And then if you want to switch to 2 mode, switch to 4 mode, back to single mode. If you want to turn your outliner off, that's where you switch it off. Okay, so just, yeah, when you first start Maya, I encourage just poke around, nothing's going to break. Just try all this stuff. Okay. And again, too, here's another part as well, which is our workspaces. So here, as I mentioned before, these you can get to all kinds of different kind of workspaces, and we're not going to do this at all. We're going to stay in Maya Classic right now, and maybe modeling standard. That just has certain tool sets that are commonly used for certain tasks. Okay, so like I said, this class is going to be very straightforward. I'm not going to get too crazy or too complex. Another area too, which is kind of the sister to the outliner, is over here, the channel box. And the channel box, we went over that in a little bit, but you can control the models here numerically. So, and you can find out information about the model. It's like there's information about, like, we can change the amount of polygons that are in this right now. We can change different kinds of things in the objects as well, scale and things like that. Like here, like right now, maybe I tend to like very whole numbers. So here I just changed the scale there. So now this is exactly 2 in scale. So I'm going to check here. Okay, so that's fine. And I don't know if you remember the last lesson, we rotated it exactly 45 degrees. If I wanted to change it back, I can do this. I can type in a 0 there. Yeah, see? So what then I called zeroed out. I gave it no rotation there. Okay, but if I want to, if I wanted to get it back to what it originally was. So that's where you would access this in channel box. Oops. Yeah, I have to have something selected there. So you would access these things here in the channel box. You can also rename things here. Don't get worried about this stuff right now. As students get confused, all this stuff, we're not going to be doing anything with this stuff for the first few modules. Don't get worried about it. And there's no lessons that are going to make you do stuff here. I mean, besides little things like maybe giving a precision kind of number to something. Okay. So, and then down here, we're not going to do anything with this yet, but we have layers. So if you work with some other programs, there's layers. Layers are nice because I'm going to pick an object. I'm going to put it on a layer. Okay. And I'm going to switch that object off, switch it on. Put that one on a layer. Okay. So layers are definitely nice and handy, especially as you get like models that are more and more complex. They're really great to have. As I said, we're not going to do too much with animation right now, but here's your animation controls. This is your timeline. This is your, have your range slider. This is your timeline. You have your range slider here. You have playback controls like like video controls. So if we had something animating, you can control that right there. There's also something down here, which you'll want to look at in the future. All Maya commands are all in here. This is your MEL scripting. So you won't be dealing with that right now, but all the commands are in here in the status line, and you can look at things there. There's a little help menu down here just to tell you what tool you're in. And these are the key things you're going to be dealing with when you first, work with Maya. So really just wanted to show you how to move the cameras around, how to manipulate objects, have a sense of what the interface is. And we will, like every bit of it, we'll go over in further and further detail. And yeah, so this is kind of, the basics here. The next lesson, we're going to make the most basic level of a model, and that will be what our objective is in this module, to kind of just get you familiarized with the interface of Maya and just to make a really simple model. Okay, so there we go. Let's finish up this lesson here, and we'll move on to the next one.